Man, ICE has been cold-blooded with this one. Let me tell you how something is rotten in this system. When the government doesn't arrest you, it leaves a message, not a warrant, not a citation, not a case number, a death card. Because ICE is now doing whatever the hell they want to do. Now, I'm not against ICE, by the way. I believe that they're doing their operations, but it's the way that you go about your operations. They are leaving a Ace of Spades card, which is known as a death card. They've been using this tactic back in the 101 Airborne Division back in Vietnam. They left these cards inside of vehicles after ICE detained people in Colorado. Not a spooky quote, not a cryptic symbol, a clean, bold label like it's a business card from the underworld. And as you can see here, let me show you ICE Denver field office, and it has the Aurora Detention Center address on it as well. This is not law enforcement. And again, I agree with the ICE operation of eradicating our country from, deporting illegal immigrants. But this is not law enforcement. This is intimidation with the letter here. And if you think it's just a prank, then you haven't been paying attention to how power talks when it thinks nobody is listening. And here is really what's on record from the local reporting and community verification that I've read, that ICE has detained people in Eagle County, part of the Western Slope there in Colorado, with reports that many arrests were tied to traffic stops, and at least one detention happened near a bus stop. And a local immigrant advocacy organization, Voces Unidas, says that non-Latino community members were detained, and family members later found later found aces of spades inside abandoned vehicles. And these were kind of like calling cards back in the Vietnam War. They used to put these cards on unalive Viet Cong members, used as a PsyOps to scare other Viet Cong away. And on these cards, as you can see right here, they printed the address of the ICE field office and the Aurora detention facility information. So ICE through DHS said it is unequivocally condemning this, and that the incident and the ICE Office of Professional Responsibility would investigate this. So we're not dealing with the internet rumors and ghost stories now. We know that ICE have already unalived 3 people on record. 2 were on-duty ICE agent. 1 was off-duty ICE agent. 2 were white people. 1 was a black man who was shooting up celebratory shots in the air by an off-duty ICE agent. So we're dealing with an intimidation symbol physically placed and now serious enough to trigger official review. And a lot of people may ask, why does this card matter? Because this card right here has a history, and history doesn't whisper. History kicks the door in very largely. The Ace of Spades didn't become the death card on TikTok. It's been used in war culture. And we kind of learned about this when I was in the military. It was kind of like one of those stories with, the 101 Airborne guys used to do back in the Vietnam War to scare off the Viet Cong. Now, unfortunately, we did a strategic retrograde in Vietnam. And for you guys who don't understand what a strategic retrograde is, it's a retreat. Okay, whether you go to the War College or you go to battle staff. And for some of you people who served in the Army, Marines, you may understand some of the terminology that I'm using. But a strategic retrograde is retreating. Now, it's probably not as embarrassing as what Biden had the military to do in Afghanistan. It's not as embarrassing as that. But again, it's strategically retrograding, which is also known as a retreat. It's okay. Now, some people will say, we didn't lose the Vietnam War because it wasn't essentially our war. We were a part of the war. And when we had too many casualties, we pulled out. That's a perspective and narrative. Okay. Then others will say, no, we lost because we had so many American military members to perish during that war. Now, again, this card, it acts as a symbol that some U.S. troops believe would scare the enemy or at minimal pump of their own morale. So we know that ICE agent is very familiar. Some of these guys may even be prior military or had family members that were part of the military that told them this story. They researched the story. But there are accounts describing how soldiers left the Ace of Spades on bodies or in contested areas as psychological signaling, psychological warfare, that they were pulling PsyOps. Now, whether it actually frightened Vietnamese forces is debatable, is it not? And multiple sources point out cultural mirror imaging errors, assuming that Americans assuming that the symbol meant what Americans thought it meant. And that's the first big lesson here. PsyOps doesn't need to be true. It needs to be felt. It needs to be feared. In other words, the point isn't whether the symbol is objectively scary. The point is whether the target understands the message being sent by the sender. So the Ace of Spades have been placed after detention doesn't read like folklore. They're actually leaving these cards in Denver. And what I gather from this, and again, I'm for ICE operations of eradicating our country of illegal immigrants. This is not against ICE, but their actions. See, you can be wrong and right at the same time. You can go after an illegal immigrant and detain them and deport them, but you can also be wrong on how you do it. But this reads something like a fear tactic to me, that we can touch you and we want you to remember that. That's not public safety. That's psychological control. And some of you may disagree or agree with this tactic. I just don't. Because in the US, symbols have always been part of enforcement. Sometimes it's a badge. Sometimes it's a baton. Sometimes it's a no-knock warrant at 2 a.m. in the morning. And sometimes when people think they're untouchable, it's a little calling card that says, you don't just have to have a legal problem, you have a power problem. And this organization, Voces Unidas, frames this as a deliberate intimidation, pointing to the cause history as an imitation tool, and arguing this was meant to send a message to the Latino community on the Western Slope. And this report here by X's, or how you ever pronounce the name, notes that the nonprofit recorded 129 reports of ICE activity in the region that month. And that's according to their data. So even if somebody wants to play dumb, this didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened during heightened scrutiny of tactics and during visible expansion, pressures across detention and enforcement systems nationally, rather. We got to point these things out, because you can be right and wrong. Because when politics turn people into mascots and enforcement turns communities into targets, everybody starts auditioning for the role of the good one, the good immigrant, the good minority, the good citizen, the I'm not like them special. But the problem is the system doesn't always read your audition tape, so to speak. Because when enforcement culture gets comfortable, it doesn't just look for lawbreakers, it looks for leverage. And leaving death cards after detention, if proven, will be the kind of behavior that poisons legitimacy from the inside out. Because again, when you're in Denver, when you're in Colorado, and you're living death cards, that's a historical reference. Then you shoot and kill people in another state, it sends a very loud and auditable message. And now this is why it matters to me. A mountain of research on policing legitimacy and procedural justice shows that how authorities treat people, dignity, fairness, transparency, it shapes public trust and cooperation. So when people see intimidation theatrics, they don't think, wow, what the hell is going on here? I trust the system more. They think if they'll do that to them, then they'll do that to anybody. That's not just immoral, that's operational stupidity. Because again, the two people who were killed in the past 2 weeks rather, have been white American citizens. Then as I was telling you, they was using this tactics, and this was during the Vietnam War. Okay, let's just do a little bit of reading here before we get into it. It says here, during the Vietnam War, the U.S. soldiers used the Ace of Spades as a death card in psychological warfare against the Viet Cong, believing the card represented bad luck or death. A superstition stemming from French colonial influence. Cards were left on enemy bodies and scattered in the jungle to intimidate them. That is where they're getting this so-called Ace of Spades. Because again, they were conducting psychological operations, were a formal part of strategy using leaflets, symbols, messaging campaigns, some measurable, some methodology, right? Going back to the French colonial period. But a lot of it has been debated. But what's not debated is this: psychological pressure is a weapon. Sometimes government use it openly. Sometimes it shows up as an informal culture. Sometimes it's a few bad actors testing the boundaries. And whether this was a rogue stunt or something deeper, maybe it was one or two ICE agents, because that's what people say. It wasn't all ICE agent. Of course it wasn't. It just happened there in Denver. But if this had been overlooked, just like anything else in government, anything else in law enforcement, it was spread across the nation. And the public question is the same. Who authorized this message? Who benefits from fear? And what does it say about the culture when somebody thought that this was okay? Let's be clear. Nobody should be threatening or targeting federal agents. Do not get me wrong. We should not be getting involved. We should not be threatening federal agents, period. But that road is gasoline and matches, in my opinion. But also, if authorities are using intimidation symbols against communities, that's not tough, because again, I know there's this borderline, sort of fragile line that we look at. Oh, well, they're going after illegals, but American citizens are getting killed too, where they're involving themselves in ICE operations, but now they're applying psychological warfare on people. So now, even though American citizens should not be involved in ICE operations, in my opinion, they have the right to protest, they have the right to freedom of speech, they have the right to all that, but impeding ICE from doing their duties, responsibilities, you should not be involved. Protecting illegal immigrants inside the country, in my opinion, should not be involved. But should law enforcement use Vietnam psychological war tactics to scare people, knowing the resemblance in the representation of these Ace of Spades cards? This is not tough. This is abuse wearing a uniform. And when institutions blur the line, it creates a pressure cooker where everyone gets less safe psychologically. That's why investigation into these certain acts matters. Because if this is real, right? They had real cards. If this is real to the degree in which they're stating, it needs accountability that actually bites. Think about what I'm getting at. And I'm not stating that ICE is operating outside of their jurisdiction or they're operating fully inside of this jurisdiction, but you already have your face covered. And the only people who know who you are other ICE agents, other Border Patrol agents, other DEA agents, other FBI agents, have been deputized to be ICE agents. They're the only ones who know your identity. Now you're leaving death cards where people you have detained to scare other immigrants possibly. But at the same time, the staunch nuance and the contradiction of the hypocrisy, when I see American citizens get killed and then you're leaving death cards of illegal immigrants, well, who's safe? Colorado's primary ICE detention hub is the Aurora contract facility, often discussed as having capacity around 1,500 people there, operating via private contracting. And the private contracting frameworks that have long attracted controversy around conditions and oversight. Nationally, multiple advocacy and research groups have tracked expanding detention footprints and shifting enforcement patterns, debated fiercely in politics. Now, yes, but some of these are measurable in infrastructure growth and detention usage. So again, this death card story is not a random urban legend. It's landing inside a bigger moment where power is being used loudly and communities are reporting heightened activity. Now, here's my opinion very sharply. And for some of you who've been here for a while, probably unpopular. Because when America can't defend a policy, when it can't defend a policy, it starts performing authority. And when it can't justify a tactic, it starts outsourcing the message to symbols and fear. This Ace of Spades isn't just a card, it's the oldest language of dominance. We were here, we touched your life, and we want you to remember who did it. ICE did it. Again, I'm not anti-ICE, but I can be anti-ICE theatrics. I can be anti-ICE psychological warfare, can I not? You can be right and wrong at the same time. Now, we don't take this seriously. Again, if they're not going to do investigations, if they're not going to condemn these actions, then as I stated before, this will be normalized nationally. We will normalize the idea that intimidation is a feature and not a bug. Because when I'm reading this story here, right? I'm going to blow this up as large as I can for you guys. In Vietnam, the Ace of Spades death card was thought by some to put a scare into the superstitious enemy and were left behind on dead enemy bodies after a firefight. Other soldiers use the card as a moral booster, wearing it proudly on helmets. We've seen those movies where they had an Ace of Spades. Some of you guys probably didn't even know what it was. You just thought, oh, he's part of a particular unit, which was true. Mostly 101 Airborne, but other groups wore it as well. It states here, when in Nam, what did this card mean to you? The Ace of Spades gained notoriety after Francis Ford Coppola was epic in Apocalypse Now hit screens in 1979. The card was flung onto bodies of dead enemy soldiers as part of psychological warfare designed to wreak fear in the Vietnamese. The card associated with death could be found among standard issues card decks distributed to soldiers. The practice of putting these cards on the bodies of dead enemies began in Vietnam and was probably initiated by American soldiers in the field. Even though it became popular during the 1960s, the card used as a symbol dates earlier to the days of World War II. It was the soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division who first started wearing helmets with Ace of Spades emblem painted on them. And the reference, however, was different. For them, it was a good luck symbol. And we see how symbols throughout time have amalgamated and transformed over time. At one point in time, the Ace of Spades was represented as good. World War II. Then in Vietnam, it was a death card. It also goes on to say that associated with good fortune and card playing. Also, since it was easily recognizable, the emblem served as a means of identification among friendlies. Yeah, a lot of people are going to state certain things. I like to start off hard, but then give you the explanation, because some people, oh, it's not only a death card, it's this. I got you. I'm going to cover it. It goes on to state the Ace of Spades, but in Vietnam, it took on a darker, more sinister meaning. It's kind of like the swastika. Now, a lot of you historical scholars out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but the swastika was first found, I believe, in pyramids in Egypt, and dating back, who knows? I don't want to give you guys this arbitrary false date, but it was a sign of peace and goodwill. But now the swastika is a sign of hate, division, Nazis, etc. Right? Now, here's a part I want you to sit with for a second. ICE says it condemned it, and they're going to do an investigation on themselves. They probably have the OPR say they're going to do an investigation. That's probably what they're going to do. But the real question is, if this is what got caught, what's happening that doesn't leave a car behind? Like, how are you going to find out who did this? Most of them wearing gloves. So you're going to fingerprint somebody? You're going to interrogate everybody in that Denver field office? And somebody going to say, it was me. Because power doesn't start with theatrics. No one's going to come clean and say this unless they can pinpoint who was in that area, who was on that beat, who had that part of town. It doesn't end with theatrics. And some people are like, oh, this is just a method that, a couple of our guys were using to deter illegal immigrants from coming from where? They're already here. And then, of course, they're looking at the news in Minneapolis, Minnesota, of citizens getting killed. Now, granted, however they impede themselves and try to impede or stop or prevent ICE from doing their duties, that's another video. But still, 2 people in the past 2 weeks have been unalive. Again, power doesn't start with theatric. Power ends with theatric when it thinks it's already won. So the next question is, who put the card there? And why do they feel safe doing it? And I know what a lot of people are going to say, because they believe that they was going to get caught, probably number one. And if they did get caught, or if someone did snitch, nothing's going to happen to them. They're going to get a slap on the hand, just like all law enforcement, all police does. Only certain things occur in law enforcement where 1% of the population is actually prosecuted or get a nasty gram in their mail from law enforcement. But I think we should really follow what comes out of this investigation, because Colorado today looks like a test market for what America may tolerate tomorrow. If we just let this blow over, and this is how law enforcement is going to, implement this in part of the next procedures. And we have the compare and contrast of going after illegal immigrants and American citizens impeding ICE on their duties and responsibilities within their jurisdiction, or some people will say they're operating outside of their jurisdiction. My only question is this is going to be the last theatrics that some ICE agents do? Again, I'm not saying all. I'm not saying Minnesota. I'm not saying Florida or any blue liberal sanctuary state. I'm talking about Denver. But if it's overlooked, if it's swept under the rug, could other similar tactics, acts, psychological warfare, physical warfare, military warfare begin to spread? That's the questions. Will America tolerate this tomorrow? Yeah, there's going to be some people that ICE never affect. ICE may never affect you, may never affect me. But some of us are probably thinking, I don't want to go down that part of the street. I'm going to read some of your comments here. Dank says they are in Colorado Springs too. That's been happening to us. I'm not as outraged as the masses. They do want sold to U.S. every day now as a violation of rights. Los Angeles cops have tattoos and gang culture. I was going to mention that. Counting bodies is being here. If you look at a lot of these cops in, I'll just say California, because I'm not too familiar with the landscape of LA, this part, that part, the different counties and sheriffs, and they have all these different types of law enforcement agencies. But nevertheless, I look at it as if, why do police officers, now granted, they could be private military, because a lot of military guys have, death tattoos and skulls and, American flag. The only thing I have is a Marine Corps tattoo. It's kind of like a rite of passage, so to speak, especially in the unit that I was in. But we just didn't go out and haphazardly just unalive people just for the hell of it. FYI. But I did a special, I forgot, it was years ago. I did it on my YouTube channel. I forgot, guys, about all these LA or these California cop gangs, and they had distinguishing tattoos that let other cops know and perpetrators know what gang they were a part of in California being a cop. So I got you. They've been doxxed already. I saw the list online. Let's see what else. We got Iron Will. Salute to you, brother, as well. It's been a while since I made it live. Good. I'm glad you can hop in. Same tattoo from last police department. Okay. Stormy Weather says they already know why they put the card there. Absolutely. They knew the history behind that. No one just go and gets an ace of card. They didn't use a king of spade. Okay. They didn't use the two of diamond as that third spade. That's your cut card. You mean less than 1%? Of course. Of course. I'm not saying all ICE agents at all. I'm not fighting for them. But again, I think we really need to call out hypocrisy when we see it. Okay. Given the times that we're living in, whether you agree or disagree with President Trump's, his administration and the tactics and strategies they're using with ICE and Border Patrol and DEA and FBI and all the 3- and 4-letter federal agencies that he have deputized to be Customs and Border agents, as well as ICE agents to go and apprehend and detain and deport illegal immigrants. Again, illegal immigrants should not be in the country. Got it. All for it. But when you come across information like this, it should be headline news. And in my opinion, as an American citizen, we should really be speaking out against stuff like this. Because again, things can get nationally worse if we continue like, well, they should never be in the country again. They should be scared. Yeah, they should not be in the country. They should be scared on their own cognizance, but not because they're referencing a death card and we see ICE agents already kill people. And then the American citizen like, wait a minute, they putting death cards out. Now, some of you may not even make the connection. You may not even connect those data points. I understand. But there is a compare and contrast here, and I'm just pointing it out. You guys have a great, wonderful day. This is Blacklogic.